The reciprocity trap. It's about why those free favors can end up being deceptively expensive. Have you ever gotten a gift that felt, I don't know, less like a gift and more like an invoice? Well, in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain on the hidden psychology of favors and why that old saying, no strings attached, is a lot of the time just a myth.
Yeah, let's really dive into that uncomfortable feeling, right? Someone does something nice for you out of the blue, and suddenly you're hit with this weird mix of being grateful, but also feeling like you now owe them something. We're going to explore exactly what's going on there, the powerful social forces that create this sense of being indebted.
So, to really get why this happens, we have to look at this fundamental, unwritten rule. It's like an invisible social contract that governs almost everything we do with other people. It's so deep, so ingrained in us that most of the time we don't even realize it's there.
And that rule is called the norm of reciprocity. It's basically the social expectation that we should pay people back for what they've given us. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. This isn't just a nice idea. It's like the social glue that has held human societies together for forever. It creates this whole system of mutual obligation that helps us all cooperate. But here's the thing. This rule has two sides to it. A kind of dark side. See, positive reciprocity is what we've been talking about, returning a favor. But there's also negative reciprocity, and that's the impulse to return a harm, an eye for an eye. Both sides are really about the same thing, keeping the social scales balanced.
Okay, so now that we get the basic rule, let's look at how this social glue can be twisted, how it can be turned into a weapon of influence, a tool that's used to get you to say yes when deep down you really want to say no.
Psychologists have a name for this stuff, compliance techniques, and they're basically clever ways to weaponize that natural urge we have to give back. They're specifically designed to kind of bypass your logical brain and go straight for that automatic I owe you button that's wired inside all of us.
Okay, here's a classic one. It's called the foot in the door technique. So imagine someone asks you to sign a petition. It's a small request, super easy to say yes to, right? But then a week later, that same person comes back and asks for a donation. Because you already said yes once, you feel this internal pressure to be consistent and say yes a second time. See how that works? And then you've got the total flip side of that, the door in the face technique. This time, someone starts by asking for something huge, like a $100 donation. You're probably going to say no, but then they immediately follow up with, okay, how about just $10? All of a sudden, that smaller request feels like a concession, like they've done you a favor by backing down, and that creates this little feeling of obligation to meet them in the middle and agree.
So, this kind of manipulative behavior brings us to a certain type of person, often called the toxic gift giver. These are the people who use favors and gifts not to connect with you, but to control you. And we're not just talking about a sales tactic here. For some, this is a really deeply ingrained part of their personality.
When you look at it, it really all boils down to intent. A genuine giver, they're looking for connection. But a toxic giver, they're looking for control. Their gift is really just an investment. It's a tool they use to make you feel obligated, to gain power over you. And a lot of times this is driven by things like narcissism or Machiavellianism. Okay, to really, really understand just how powerful these forces of obligation and social pressure can be, we need to look at some famous and honestly pretty chilling historical experiments that just laid it all bare. This is where things get really interesting. So here we have a timeline of 3 absolute game changers in social psychology. The Asch conformity experiments in the 50s, the Milgram obedience experiment in 63, and the Stanford prison experiment in 71. These 3 basically ripped the lid off our understanding of human behavior and showed just how easily we can all be swayed by group pressure, authority, and that sense of obligation.
First up, Solomon Asch's experiments. Get this. He found that a whopping 74% of people would conform to an obviously wrong answer at least once, just to fit in with a group. They would literally deny what their own eyes were telling them. It's just staggering proof of how our deep need to belong can make us agree with something we know is false.
Then we get to Stanley Milgram's experiment, and this number, 63%, is just shocking. That's the percentage of regular people who were willing to administer the maximum 450-volt shock to another person, a complete stranger, all because a guy in a lab coat told them to. Just think about that.
And what's so wild is that Milgram himself said it wasn't because these people were aggressive or cruel. He said the ordinary people who shocked the victim did so out of a sense of obligation. It was a sense of duty to the authority figure that was so strong, it just completely overrode their own moral compass. That's the reciprocity trap taken to its absolute extreme.
And that brings us to the Stanford prison experiment, which had to be stopped after only 6 days. Why? Because regular college students who were randomly assigned to be either guards or prisoners got so deeply into their roles that the guards became abusive and the prisoners became distressed. It was powerful, scary proof that the situation itself can create these powerful obligations and completely change our behavior.
Okay, so we've seen how this trap works, from a simple, unwanted favor all the way to these extreme experiments. The big question is, how do we escape it? How do we navigate this stuff in our own lives and reclaim our sense of autonomy?
But, it's not always about some manipulative person trying to trap us. Sometimes the problem is actually us. So let's ask this. Why is it so incredibly hard sometimes just to receive an act of kindness without feeling all that baggage and obligation?
Well, it turns out there are a few big reasons. For some people, it's just that they hate being in the spotlight. For others, it might be low self-esteem, whispering that they don't really deserve it. And for a lot of us, let's be honest, we've just been conditioned by past experiences where a gift always had strings attached. So now we're suspicious, even of genuine kindness. So the solution isn't to just become a cynic and reject every nice thing that comes your way. The solution is to become more discerning, more aware. Think of that awareness as your shield. It's what helps you tell the difference between a real gift and a transaction in disguise.
All right, so here are 4 practical steps you can take to reclaim your autonomy. Number 1, just pause. Take a second and try to assess the intent behind the favor. 2, acknowledge the gesture, not the debt. You can say, "Thank you, that was very thoughtful," not, "Oh my gosh, now I owe you one." 3, accept or decline with confidence. It's your choice. And finally, number 4, if you do accept, make a conscious decision to release that feeling of obligation. Let it go.
So, here's a final thought to leave you with. What if the most powerful favor you can ever do for yourself is to understand when a gift isn't really for you at all? Because the moment you realize that a manipulative favor is all about the giver's need for control, not your need for help, that's when you're free. The whole thing loses its power, and those invisible strings, they just disappear.